The Ash and the Silk, Chapter 1. A Glimpse of the Impossible. New York City, 2024. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned art historian and curator at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, moved through the hushed halls of the new Echoes of the Avant-Garde exhibition with a practiced, almost reverent stride. Her life was a tapestry woven with threads of intellect, dedication, and a quiet, unassuming elegance. At 72, her mind remained as sharp as a newly honed pencil. Her passion for art undimmed by the passage of time. She loved the silence of museums, the way history spoke through objects, the stories held within fabric and paint. The exhibition was a celebration of radical fashion and artistic expression from the tumultuous 1960s and early 70s. Evelyn had personally overseen its creation, meticulously sourcing each piece, ensuring every detail was perfect. She knew every garment, every sculpture, every painted canvas like an extension of her own memory, or so she thought. She paused before a central display, a spotlight illuminating a garment suspended within a glass case. It was a dress, a long, flowing, deeply bohemian dress, crafted from an exquisite, hand-dyed silk in shades of forest green and deep sapphire, adorned with intricate, almost mystical embroidery depicting intertwining vines and tiny, stylized birds. The sleeves were wide and billowy, a neckline a delicate scoop. It was breathtaking, a true masterpiece of artistic clothing. Evelyn's breath hitched. A sudden, sharp gasp escaped her lips, echoing in the quiet gallery. Her hand flew to her mouth, trembling. The elegant composure that defined her shattered in an instant. Her vision blurred, not from tears, but from a dizzying rush of memory, so vivid, so potent, it felt like a physical blow. It was her dress. Not similar, not inspired by. It was her dress. The one she had designed herself, painstakingly sewn by hand in a tiny, cluttered studio apartment in Greenwich Village in the summer of 1974. The one she had poured her rebellious spirit into, her dreams of artistic freedom, her audacious hope for a life untethered by convention. The one she had worn only once, and the one she had, in a moment of agonizing despair and defiant ritual, burned to ashes in a secluded spot in Central Park 50 years ago. Every detail was identical. The precise shade of green from the natural dyes she had experimented with, the unique, slightly imperfect stitching on the left sleeve where she'd pricked her finger, the way the light caught the tiny, almost invisible gold thread she'd woven into the embroidery, a secret shimmer known only to her. Her mind reeled, frantically trying to reconcile the impossible. How could this dress, this tangible echo of a past she had meticulously incinerated, be here? In a museum? On display? It was a ghost, risen from the ashes, demanding an explanation. Evelyn felt a cold dread seep into her bones, a terrifying premonition that the quiet, ordered archive of her past was about to be ripped open, revealing a truth far more complex and potentially devastating than the carefully constructed narrative she had built her life upon. The exhibition, once a source of professional pride, had become a portal to an impossible, haunting reality. Chapter 2. The Embers of Memory. The impossibility of the dress being on display in the Met, a dress Evelyn herself had set ablaze 5 decades ago, sent shockwaves through her meticulously ordered world. Her initial reaction was pure, unadulterated disbelief, followed by a chilling certainty that her mind was playing tricks on her, a cruel jest of aging memory. But the details were too precise. The unique color, the particular embroidery stitch, the tiny gold thread. It wasn't a similar dress. It was her dress. She walked away from the display, her legs feeling like lead, finding a quiet bench in a less trafficked gallery. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. She tried to rationalize. Perhaps someone had copied her design. But the stitching, the slight imperfection, the sheer uniqueness of the hand-dyed silk, it screamed of a singular creation, not a reproduction. The memory of burning the dress was as vivid as if it had happened yesterday. It was the summer of 1974, Greenwich Village, a time of artistic fervor, radical ideals, and a profound personal heartbreak. She had poured her soul into that dress, a symbol of her dreams, her identity. And then, in a moment of despair and defiance, fueled by betrayal and disillusionment, she had taken it to a secluded corner of Central Park, doused it in lighter fluid, and watched it burn, the flames consuming her hopes and her past. The ashes she had ensured were scattered, leaving no trace. Or so she believed. Now, 50 years later, it stood before her, resurrected. Evelyn, the meticulous art historian, knew she needed to investigate. This wasn't just a personal haunting. It was a curatorial mystery, an impossible artifact. She approached the exhibition's lead researcher, a bright, eager young woman named Chloe, who had worked closely with Evelyn on the project. "Chloe," Evelyn began, her voice strained but attempting to sound professional, "about the phoenix dress, the one in the central display. Can you tell me its provenance again?" Chloe beamed, delighted to share details of such a significant piece. "Of course, Dr. Reed. It's one of the stars of the show. It's attributed to a mysterious, anonymous artist from the Greenwich Village scene of the early 70s, known only as E. The label sewn inside just says Evelyn. It was acquired by the museum in 2005 from a private collection, a bequest from a reclusive art collector, Mr. Julian Thorne. His notes indicated he bought it from a small, independent gallery in Soho in 1975. He considered it a singular, visionary piece, and insisted it be attributed simply as the phoenix dress, due to its mysterious reappearance after supposedly being destroyed. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Evelyn, phoenix dress, supposedly destroyed, Julian Thorne. The name resonated with a faint, unsettling echo. Thorne. She had known a Julian in her youth, a periphery figure in the Greenwich Village art scene, a collector who had always seemed to know more than he let on, with a gaze that had unnerved her. Could it be the same Julian Thorne? And supposedly destroyed? How could he know it was supposedly destroyed? The pieces, disjointed at first, began to form a chilling pattern. If the dress was truly hers, and she had burned it, then someone else must have recovered it. And if Julian Thorne acquired it, he must have known its story. Why? How? Evelyn realized she needed to delve into her own past, not just the dress's provenance. She revisited her old journals, tucked away in her attic, dusty repositories of her youth. They were filled with the fiery idealism of her 20s, her artistic struggles, her friendships, and the profound, crushing heartbreak that led to the dress's destruction. The journals chronicled her intense, passionate relationship with an older, charismatic artist named Leo Maxwell. He was a celebrated figure in the avant-garde scene, a mentor, a lover, a muse. But he was also manipulative, possessive, and ultimately, a betrayer. The journals described the moment she discovered his infidelity with her closest friend, a fellow artist named Clara. The raw anguish, the sense of absolute violation, the feeling that her world had crumbled. The burning of the dress was an act of catharsis, a ritualistic severing of ties, a rejection of all that Leo and that period represented. She had designed the dress for a performance art piece they were planning together. A celebration of their artistic union. When that union shattered, so too did the dress. But the journals also contained a curious entry from weeks before the burning. Evelyn had worn the dress briefly for a photo shoot with Leo, a private session in their shared studio, for a project they were discussing. Just a few photos, quickly discarded. Had one survived? Had Leo kept it? Or Clara? The embers of memory were beginning to glow, illuminating not just the truth about the dress, but the agonizing details of a betrayal that had scarred her deeply, pushing her to abandon her own artistic aspirations and embrace the safe, academic world of art history. The dress was not merely an object, it was a key, unlocking a Pandora's box of painful memories, of a past she had meticulously buried, and a secret that refused to stay in the ashes. The ghost of the impossible dress was demanding to be understood, to be confronted. Chapter 3: The Tangled Weave. The phoenix dress, now confirmed as her own, had ripped open the meticulously sealed vault of Evelyn's past. The journals, filled with the raw emotions of a heartbroken young artist, brought back the searing pain of Leo Maxwell's betrayal and Clara's complicity. The name Julian Thorne, the art collector who had bequeathed the dress to the Met, now pulsed with a terrifying significance. How had he acquired the dress she had burned? Why had he known it was supposedly destroyed? And what role did he play in this impossible resurrection? Evelyn, the astute historian, knew that to understand the present, she had to fully confront the past. She delved deeper into her journals, searching for any mention of Julian Thorne beyond his peripheral presence in the Greenwich Village art scene. There were only a few entries, vague and unsettling. Julian, a collector who sometimes visited Leo's studio, always observing, always quietly taking notes. Evelyn had found him unnerving, his eyes too knowing, too intense. Her next step was to research Julian Thorne himself. Using the Met's extensive archives and her own formidable research skills, she discovered that Julian Thorne, in addition to being a reclusive collector, had also been a significant, albeit quiet patron of the avant-garde art scene in the late 60s and early 70s. He often bought pieces directly from artists, sometimes before they gained widespread recognition. He also had a reputation for acquiring lost or destroyed works almost as a personal crusade to preserve what others deemed worthless. This new information deepened the mystery. If Julian specialized in lost works, had he somehow known about her act of destruction? Had he been there? Had he salvaged the dress from the flames? Informal session in their studio, just weeks before the breakup. Had a photograph of her in the dress survived? If so, who had it? Leo? Clara? She decided to seek out Clara, her former best friend, the woman whose betrayal had fractured her world. Clara had also been an artist, less known than Leo, but talented. After the breakup, Evelyn had cut all ties, plunging herself into academia, leaving the art world and its painful memories behind. Finding Clara proved difficult. Her artistic career had never fully taken off, and she had moved frequently. Finally, through a network of old artist contacts and a few carefully placed inquiries, Evelyn located her. Clara lived a quiet, solitary life in a small town upstate, far from the bustling art world. The meeting was fraught with tension. Clara, now a frail, reclusive woman, looked shocked to see Evelyn after 5 decades of silence. The initial conversation was strained, filled with unspoken accusations and lingering resentment. But Evelyn, focusing on the dress, gently broached the subject. "Clara," Evelyn began, her voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands. "I saw something at the Met. A dress. The Phoenix dress. The one I made. The one I burned." A flicker of fear, then a profound sadness crossed her face. "The dress," she whispered, her voice barely audible. It's there," Clara confessed. She had known she had been there. Not at the burning, but immediately afterward. She had followed Evelyn to Central Park that day, filled with remorse and guilt, wanting to apologize, to explain. She arrived just as the flames died down, seeing Evelyn scatter the ashes. But as Evelyn left, devastated, Clara noticed a small, smoldering bundle in the charred remains. A part of the dress, miraculously, had not fully burned. The silk, thick and tightly woven, had resisted the flames in a small section, preserving the intricate embroidery and a distinct part of the fabric. "I don't know why, Evelyn," Clara confessed, tears welling in her eyes. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was a last, desperate attempt to hold on to a piece of our friendship, of what we were, before Leo destroyed everything. "I took it. I salvaged it. It was still smoking, a little singed at the edges, but mostly intact." Clara had kept the singed fragment hidden for years, a painful memento of their fractured past. But then, in 1975, Julian Thorne, the art collector, had sought her out. He had been a silent observer of their circle, always present, always collecting. He had seen the Phoenix dress on Evelyn during the informal studio photo shoot with Leo, just weeks before the breakup. He had been captivated by its unique beauty, its artistic vision. He had even discreetly taken a few unauthorized photographs of Evelyn in the dress, an uncomfortable detail that Evelyn vaguely remembered. When he heard whispers of the talented artist Evelyn burning her masterpiece after a scandalous breakup with Leo Maxwell, he became obsessed. He approached Clara, subtly probing, eventually coaxing her to reveal the salvaged piece of the dress. He convinced her that it was a significant work of art, deserving of preservation, a testament to Evelyn's genius, even if she had tried to destroy it. Clara, still reeling from the betrayal and burdened by guilt, reluctantly gave him the fragment. Julian, true to his reputation, had somehow meticulously had the dress reconstructed using the salvaged piece as a template, adding new fabric where needed, perfectly replicating the original design and embroidery, based on his own detailed notes and those unauthorized photographs. He then attributed it to the anonymous E for Evelyn. The revelation was staggering. The dress hadn't defied fire. It had been salvaged, meticulously reconstructed, and then hidden away, waiting to be revealed. The impossible was now tragically plausible. Julian Thorne, the quiet observer, had been the architect of its resurrection, driven by a perverse desire to preserve a masterpiece, even if it meant violating the artist's desperate act of destruction. The scar on Evelyn's soul, inflicted by Leo and Clara's betrayal, now deepened with the chilling realization of Julian Thorne's intrusive, almost predatory preservation. The dress, a symbol of her dashed hopes, was also a testament to a truth far more complex than a simple act of defiance. It was a tangible echo of a past that had not only refused to be forgotten, but had been deliberately resurrected, weaving a tangled, unsettling tapestry of obsession, art, and the dark threads of human interference. The long, silent conversation with Clara had opened a door, revealing a history far more intricate and unsettling than Evelyn could have ever imagined. The unmasking of the dress's journey was complete, but the reckoning with its profound implications had just begun. Chapter 4: The Curator's Confession. The truth about the Phoenix dress, salvaged, meticulously reconstructed by Julian Thorne, and Clara's agonizing complicity in its preservation, left Evelyn reeling. The initial shock had given way to a burning anger, directed not just at Leo's betrayal, but at Julian Thorne's audacious act of appropriation, his violation of her most private, defiant moment. The dress was no longer just a symbol of her heartbreak. It was a testament to a chilling disregard for an artist's will, a deliberate act of resurrection that reopened a wound she had believed long healed. Evelyn revisited her journals, now with a new lens, searching for any clue to Julian Thorne's fascination with her, any sign of his intrusive gaze. There were fleeting mentions, Julian observing her, taking notes, a pervasive feeling of being watched. She had dismissed it as artistic eccentricity then. Now it felt sinister. The implications of Clara's confession weighed heavily. Clara, remorseful and burdened by guilt, offered Evelyn the small, singed fragment of the original dress she had initially salvaged before giving the larger piece to Julian. Evelyn took it, holding the charred silk, a tangible link to that agonizing day in Central Park. This tiny piece was proof, an undeniable relic of her intentional destruction. Evelyn, the meticulous art historian, knew she had a professional and personal obligation to act. The museum, unknowingly, was displaying a work that was not only resurrected from the artist's deliberate destruction, but was also a product of a complex, unsettling intervention. The provenance, as presented, was incomplete, misleading. She sought a meeting with the director of the Met, a formidable but fair woman named Dr. Eleanor Vance, a different Eleanor, no relation to the prior story, but a familiar name to Evelyn in this context, and the museum's legal team. Evelyn laid out the astonishing story, presenting Clara's fragment as tangible proof, along with her journals and the timeline of events. She explained the depth of the personal trauma, the deliberate act of destruction, and Julian Thorne's subsequent, almost obsessive reconstruction. The director and the legal team were stunned. The ethical implications were profound. Museums held a sacred trust to present art truthfully, to respect an artist's intent. Julian Thorne's actions, while perhaps driven by a collector's passion, bordered on artistic desecration. The Phoenix dress, while visually stunning, now carried a dark, unsettling narrative. After intense deliberation, the Met decided to act with transparency. The exhibition would remain open, but the label for the Phoenix dress would be immediately updated to include the full, complex story of its provenance, Evelyn Reed as the original artist. Her deliberate destruction of the dress in 1974, Julian Thorne's salvage and meticulous reconstruction, and the ethical questions surrounding such an act of preservation. It would be a groundbreaking moment for the museum, challenging conventional notions of art and its ownership, of an artist's control over their work. For Evelyn, this public acknowledgement was a profound step towards healing. The dress, once a private wound, was now a public conversation, a testament to her artistic vision and the complex, often painful, relationship between artist, art, and ownership. But the story of the dress also brought another, more personal and painful truth to the surface: her life's trajectory. After the heartbreak with Leo and Clara, after the symbolic burning of the dress, Evelyn had consciously, meticulously distanced herself from the raw, vulnerable world of artistic creation. She had found solace, and ultimately, great success, in the academic, analytical world of art history, in the safe distance of examining others' creations. The dress's reappearance forced her to confront the artistic self she had buried, the creative spirit she had extinguished in the ashes of that summer. The dress, in its new context, became a catalyst for a deep personal reckoning. Evelyn realized she had spent 5 decades running from the pain of that betrayal, from the vulnerability of creation itself. The anger at Leo, the pain of Clara's betrayal, the violation by Julian Thorne, these had all contributed to her retreat into the ordered, controlled world of academia. She looked at the Phoenix dress, now with its updated label. It wasn't just a garment, it was a mirror. It reflected not just her artistic past, but the choice she had made to step away from it. It was a silent question. Had she truly abandoned her art, or had she merely postponed it? The public unveiling of the dress's true story sparked considerable debate in the art world. Was it ethical to display a work salvaged from an artist's act of destruction? Did a collector's passion supersede an artist's will? Evelyn found herself at the center of this dialogue, not just as a curator, but as the artist herself, a voice she had silenced for 50 years. This unexpected return to her artistic identity, sparked by the very object she thought she had destroyed, was both daunting and exhilarating. The dress, once the symbol of her dashed hopes, was now a beacon, illuminating a path she had long thought closed. The curator, Evelyn Reed, was forced to make a profound confession to herself. The artist within her was not truly dead, merely dormant, and perhaps after 50 years, it was time to reawaken. The long road to reconciliation, not just with her past, but with her own creative spirit, had finally begun. Chapter 5: Reclaiming the Canvas. The public acknowledgement of the Phoenix dress's true, complex history at the Met was a watershed moment for Evelyn. It was a raw, vulnerable confession, not just to the art world, but to herself. The dress, once a symbol of heartbreak and suppression, had become a catalyst for profound introspection. It laid bare the path she had chosen, the meticulously ordered world of art history, a deliberate retreat from the raw, vulnerable, and often painful realm of artistic creation. The debates sparked by the dress's story, the ethics of preservation versus an artist's will, the very definition of a work of art, forced Evelyn to confront the artistic self she had buried for 5 decades. The anger she had held on to for so long, primarily towards Leo for his betrayal, but now extended to Julian Thorne for his intrusive preservation, slowly began to transmute into something else, a fierce, reawakened passion for her own creative voice. She began by revisiting her old sketchbooks, tucked away in the back of her closet, long forgotten. The initial pages were filled with the bold, experimental designs of her youth, designs mirroring the spirit of the phoenix dress. Gradually, these early sketches gave way to meticulous notes on historical art, academic theories, and curatorial plans. Looking at them now, Evelyn saw a clear trajectory, the gradual suppression of the artist in favor of the scholar. The Met's decision to tell the full story of the dress was courageous, and Evelyn found herself at the forefront of the public discourse. She gave interviews, not just as a curator, but as the original artist, Evelyn E. She spoke with a newfound clarity and emotional resonance about the pain of creative betrayal, the impulse to destroy, and the surprising, almost mystical power of art to resurface and demand to be seen. This public engagement was terrifying, exhilarating, and ultimately deeply healing. Her renewed connection with Clara, forged in the fire of shared history, continued to deepen. Clara, now free of her own decades of guilt, became a quiet confidant, offering perspective and support. They spoke not just of Leo's betrayal, but of the vibrant, idealistic spirit of their youth, the dreams they had shared, and the paths they had each taken. Clara, who had continued to dabble in art throughout her life, gently encouraged Evelyn to pick up her own brushes again. It started subtly. Evelyn began sketching in her personal time, small, tentative drawings at first, then larger, more confident pieces. The themes were familiar: nature, mythology, the intertwining of life and death, destruction and rebirth. She rediscovered the joy of working with natural dyes, of feeling the texture of silk beneath her fingertips. The creative impulse, dormant for so long, began to stir, then to flourish. Her first new piece was a small silk panel, hand-dyed in deep indigo, depicting a single, stylized phoenix rising from a pile of delicate, shimmering ashes. It was a deeply personal work, a quiet testament to her own journey of resurrection. She didn't seek to display it. It was purely for herself, a reclaiming of her canvas, a defiant act of self-love. The public fascination with the phoenix dress and Evelyn's story did not wane. The museum continued to present the dress with its updated, honest provenance, and it became a powerful symbol of artistic integrity and the enduring power of creation. Evelyn's own transformation was also inspiring, a testament to the idea that it's never too late to reclaim a part of oneself thought lost forever. She began to teach again, not just art history, but textile art and natural dyeing, sharing her rediscovered passion with a new generation of students. She encouraged them to explore their own creative voices, to embrace vulnerability, and to understand that the journey of an artist is rarely straightforward, often fraught with challenges, but always worthwhile. The scar on her soul, the deep wound inflicted by the betrayals of her youth, began to heal. It wasn't erased, but it was transformed, becoming a mark of resilience, of wisdom, of a profound capacity for forgiveness, not just for others, but for herself, for the artistic self she had abandoned. Evelyn Reed, the meticulous art historian, had finally reconnected with Evelyn E., the visionary artist. The act of burning the dress, once a desperate ritual of erasure, had paradoxically led to its resurrection, and in turn, to her own. The ash and the silk had intertwined, weaving a new, richer tapestry of a life reclaimed, a creative spirit rekindled, and a future vibrant with possibility. The museum, by displaying her impossible dress, had not just preserved a work of art, It had helped an artist find her way home.